Ag and Natural Resources. I want to start with some announcements so I don't forget what we're going to talk about. Today is Farm Bureau Day in the Capitol, and there's a lunch over at the Beacon across the street, and they welcome people to come and have lunch with the Farm Bureau folks, so it should be a good deal. And the other item we have is that my secretary, Judy, has the information on the water plan that if you want to see it ahead, we'll pass it out tomorrow when we meet. But if you want to see it ahead of time, it's available. Just stop by and see her. And then I guess that's all. Oh, and then at my pages are coming in, and we get their picture with the governor at 9 o'clock. So I'll let the committee in the capable hands of Senator Reichman. So he'll do a fine job, but we'll just proceed as normal. So with that, we will begin, and we will start with on the Department of Health and Environment, Megan Leopold from the Budget Analysis. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You should have the packet in front of you that says Kansas Department of Health and Environment at the top. The budget for KDHE is a little bit unique in that it's divided into the health portion of the agency and the environment portion of the agency. The health budget is heard in a Senate subcommittee, and the environment portion is heard in this committee. So there's a lot of information in this packet that I'll be skipping over, and that's because it pertains to the health section of the agency. So on the first page, you can see that the agency is broken down into three major categories: public health, healthcare, finance, and environment. And at the top there, you can see the overview of the entire agency's budget. So I'm going to have you skip forward to page 18. On page 18 are a list of the enhancements that the agency has requested for fiscal year 24. These will come up in the budget overview, so I'm just going to run you through them really quick, and you can ask any questions you have about the enhancements. These are all for fiscal year 24. The agency has requested $250,000, all from the state water plan, for the local environmental protection programs. This will provide funding and technical assistance to enable local authorities to develop water protection plans that complement other water quality efforts that are being implemented by state and federal agencies. The agency has also requested $50,000, again, all from the state water plan, in fiscal year 24 for a pilot effort to remove and keep trash out of Kansas streams and rivers. This will support cleanup efforts by non-governmental organizations and grants to local volunteer groups to conduct stream cleanups. The agency is requesting $30 million in fiscal year 24 to support technical assistance in drinking water and sewer system upgrades for towns with population under 500. For this enhancement request, the agency has offered two ways of funding it. The second option is, well, the first option is the $30 million SGF for fiscal year 24, followed by $10 million request for out years. This option is expected to address 25 systems in the first year. The second option presented by the agency is an expenditure of $10 million to address the systems with the greatest need, and then it'll be followed with subsequent out year requests of $10 million per year to address any remaining non-compliant systems. This option is expected to address 10 systems in the first year. Subsequent to the agency submitting their budget, the governor did not recommend funding for this request. However, the State Finance Council approved $10 million to be transferred from the Federal American Rescue Plan State Relief Fund to KDHE for Small Town Water and Sewer Infrastructure Assistance Program. Lastly, in fiscal year 24, the agency is requesting $280,000 to fund the ongoing retirement and replacement of aging laboratory equipment. So I'm going to move forward now to page 37. Page 37 starts the budget for the Division of Environment within KDHE. At the top, you can see the expenditures. The blue line is actuals, the green line is the agency's request, and the yellow line is the governor's recommendation. And then I'm going to skip forward to page 39. For fiscal year 23, the agency estimates revised expenditures of $153.5 million. This includes $36.8 million SGF. This is an all funds increase of $5.5 million, and there is no change in the SGF amount between the agency's revised request for fiscal year 23 and the SGF amount that was approved by the 2022 legislature. The shifts in the budget between the budget that was approved by 2022 legislature and the revised agency's budget are increased receipt of COVID-19 pandemic federal relief. The agency received an additional $2.1 million from CDC for COVID-19, primarily for laboratory equipment and supplies. The agency also estimates an increased expenditures of approximately $1.9 million from the Environmental Stewardship Fund. And then there was a state water plan reappropriation of about $1 million. And these were funds carried over from projects for monitoring, analyzing, and preventing harmful algae blooms in Kansas lakes. The agency's revised estimate includes 488 FTE positions, which is a decrease of 16.9 FTE positions below the number that was approved by the 2022 legislature, and that decrease is primarily in the laboratory program. And the governor concurred with the agency's fiscal year 23 revised estimate. In fiscal year 24, the agency requests expenditures of $177.4 million. That includes $34.4 million SGF. This is an all funds increase of $24 million and an SGF decrease of $2.4 million from the division's fiscal year 23 revised estimate. The first adjustment in the budget is the enhancement request for local environment protection program. Again, that was $250,000 all from the state water plan. The enhancement request for stream trash removal, which was $50,000, again, all from the state water plan fund. And the enhancement request for small town infrastructure assistance. That was a $30 million request in fiscal year 24, SGF. And then finally, the enhancement request for $280,000 SGF to support retirement and replacement of laboratory equipment. Finally, the agency's revised request has a decrease of $32.5 million SGF, and that is because they had one-time expenditures for laboratory construction in fiscal year 23 that were replaced with federal funds in fiscal year 24. The governor recommends FY 2024 expenditures totaling $147.4 million. That includes $4.4 million SGF. This is a decrease of $30 million all SGF below the agency's 24 request, and that is due to the governor not recommending the agency's enhancement request for the small town infrastructure assistance. On the next page, you can see the agency's capital improvement budget. So this is on page 41. The agency submitted a revised estimate with expenditures of $32.5 million, all SGF, for capital improvements. All of the capital improvements are related to the construction of the KDHE lab. Senate Bill 267 appropriated that $32.5 million SGF for construction of the lab at Lot 4 in downtown Topeka. It's near the docking building. The design includes 3 above-ground floors and a parking lot. And construction is estimated to last about 24 months with an estimated completion date of December of 2024. The estimated cost of the project is $65 million. You can see in fiscal year 24, the agency is requesting a total of $30.9 million, and that's all federal funds. And these funds will be used to continue the construction of the lab. The governor concurred with the agency's 23 and 24 capital improvements budget. This agency's budget was, the capital improvements budget was also heard by the Joint Building Committee last week, I believe, and the Joint Building Committee also concurred with the agency's capital improvements request. I'm happy to stand for any questions on the KDHE environment budget.
All right, thank you very much, Megan. Committee, any questions for Megan? Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Megan. I want to make sure that I understand this request for the small town infrastructure assistance. If it had been originally 30 million, did the 10 million from the federal funds reduce that overall request at this point to 20 million?
Well, that funding, I think the agency became aware of that, or that funding was not known about until after the agency submitted their budget. So I would refer that question to them to speak to how it's impacting.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm interested in $50,000 for stream trash removal. That seems like, were you going to be able to clean a river for $50,000? Or, and it said throughout the state, it kind of, we don't have any rivers, but isn't that optimistic? Do that for $50,000? I mean, I'm delighted if we could.
Well, the information that I have describes it as grants that'll go out to local volunteer groups that can use that money to clean up local streams. But again, the agency will have more information on how they see that being distributed.
You have another question? Or, okay. Anybody else? Senator Reichman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your presentation. This, I don't know if it's really going to be for you or not, or for other next people to come up, but I always hear a lot about the money that comes from the federal government with the COVID money. And then on 39, you mention it, the Federal Centers for Disease Control due to COVID-19 for supplies, for laboratories and so on. Do we have a record of how much is being spent and how much do we have left over of the COVID-19 from the federal government? Do you know anything about that, or would need that go to another presenter?
We do have information on that. I don't have it in front of me, but that's something that that we have been tracking, not just for KDHE, but across the state agencies. It's an ongoing, funds are shifting year to year, and agencies will receive funding for one project, and then that might go away, but a new project funding might pop up. So it's complex, but I can provide some information on that.
Senator Fang.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your presentation. On the $30 million, the governor did not recommend for 2023. Am I reading it that way? But for 2024, what's the thought process? I wonder why we're not taking care of that now. That's my first question.
You're correct that the governor did not recommend the $30 million for the agency's enhancement request for the small town infrastructure. I can't speak to the governor's thought process on that.
Because if we have the money, you would think it was pretty important stuff. That was my first question. If I may, Mr. Chairman. The second part of that is that when you take $30 million, is that going to, we got a lot of small towns in Kansas. So has anybody ever looked and said, here's what the real cost of this thing would be statewide? And, where's the 30 million fit in that game? And I would think you would hit some real small towns that might have to spend $10 million for 150 people. So I don't know how you go through that process. So I just wondered if you could kind of maybe speak to that.
What I can speak to is that the agency has provided some estimates on how many towns would benefit from the funding based on how it was funded. So I'm taking from that they have some information on that, and I would again, defer that to them.
Thank you, Megan. Next up, we have Secretary Stanning for Department of Health and Environment. Welcome to the committee.
Good to see you all. I just have a few remarks. Thanks for hearing our budget today. We have worked very hard on this, and Leo Henning will be here, and he can answer more specifically some of the questions that you had about the money distribution, the plan, the thought process behind the small towns and things like that. I would just say that we continue at KDHE to align our initiatives between our three divisions, which is Medicaid, Public Health, and Environment. We do take great care in trying to manage the funding that we do get, whether it's federal or state or just from fee funds and things. And we just appreciate all the support that you provide the Environment Division and KDHE in general. I'll turn it over to Leo for the presentation and then entertain questions with the team, if that's okay. Thank you.
Welcome to the committee, Leo.
Good morning, Chairman Kirshen and committee members. It's happy to see you all here today. My name is Leo Henning. I'm the Deputy Secretary and Director of Environment at the Kansas Department of Health and Environment. And I'm going to give you an overview of what KDHE Division of Environment does, and then a little bit about our budget. My slides. The top button? Right? Okay. All right. Fast learner. So here's an overview of our organization at KDHE. As you can see, Janet Stanek is secretary at the top. The support functions within KDHE are listed in the middle, and then we have the three major divisions, which is Public Health, Environment, and Healthcare Finance, which is the state Medicaid program. So our mission is to protect and improve the health and environment for all Kansans. And the way the Division of Environment does it is we try to ensure that you have clean air to breathe, clean water to drink, and clean soil to live on. There we go. So here is a list of the federal acts in which the Division of Environment implements. These are major environmental acts, and we implement them in the state instead of the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. EPA still reviews and audits our work to make sure that we are implementing the plans per the federal requirements. Just a note that we are a highly regulatory agency. These acts are very specific in what you can and can't do. So our typical process is we receive applications from an entity that wants to do something. We look at those applications, make sure that they meet the standards, and then we issue the permit. After the permit is issued, we then go out and provide inspections to ensure that they are operating within their permit requirements. We provide technical assistance to those permittees to make sure that they understand what the requirements are. And then, unfortunately, there are times where we do have to go to enforcement to make adjustments at the facility. The next slide is not coming up. No. Sorry. That slide is blank, but it's a listing. If you have the packets, it's a listing of all of the bureaus within the Division of Environment, plus all of the programs within each bureau. So if you have a question about what is being done in what bureau, you can look at this and get a pretty good idea of what bureau you need to talk to. And as always, you can always call me and I'll get you to the right place. The next one, so I'm going to talk about our Bureau of Air just a little bit. It follows the Clean Air Act. They issue air permits for air emissions. They maintain the state's ambient air monitoring program also. Also within the Bureau of Air is the asbestos program, where they license as contractors that do asbestos abatements in the state to make sure they understand the requirements of performing that work. And then the second is the lead program, which is basically the same program, but it is for contractors that do lead abatement. All right, next bureau is Bureau of Field Services. The Field Services has all the district offices. We have 6 district offices around the state, should say main district offices. And that's where all of our inspectors are in-house so that they can get out to the facilities quicker to do their inspection reporting. Also within the district operations is the emergency response actions. So whenever there's a spill or an emergency like a tornado and we have debris management issues, those are the folks that go out and help the communities with their solid waste. We also, these are the folks that go out and investigate complaints. We had 381 complaints just last year, and those complaints, you can imagine what they range from. And so those are the folks that go out and investigate the complaints and make sure that if there's an issue there, it's followed up with. Also within the Bureau is the feedlot group, the livestock waste management section that does the permitting and inspections at feedlot facilities. Another program within Field Services is the Watershed Restoration Protection Strategy, which is the non-point program, which deals with runoff from ag fields. It's more than that, but I'm being very general here. And then the Drinking Water Protection Program, which helps municipalities implement best management practices to reduce nitrates in the source area for their groundwater wells that they use for drinking water. So the next slide, oh my. Again, if you have it in your package, it is the district offices and the amount of staff we have in each one. We have 80 people in the district offices. We have 363 in Topeka, which gives us a total of 443 FTEs. Next is the Bureau of Environmental Remediation, which is where the underground storage tank, petroleum storage tank program is. They issue permits and provide inspections and cleanup actions at underground storage tank sites. Most of those are going to be gasoline stations. The next one is the Superfund program and state cleanup programs. The Superfund program is the EPA-led program. The state equivalent to that is the state response program. Responsible parties can choose to go to the federal government to do their cleanup work, or they can go to the state under our state authority, but it's the same program as the EPA program. And then we have other state programs like the voluntary cleanup program and the orphan site program. Voluntary is somebody who has a contaminated property and they want it cleaned up. They can come to the state, we provide oversight, and they can get a certificate at the end that says that they're done. And then the orphan site program are abandoned sites where there is no longer a responsible party, so therefore the state monitors those sites to make sure that there's no exposure there. Redevelopment program is programs like the Brownfields program, environmental use control, and in the innocent landowner program, it allows properties to be redeveloped, bought, sold, so that these properties can continue to move and be used, even though they may be contaminated. And then the last one I have on this one is the surface mining program down in Frontenac. Deals mostly with the coal mining reclamation areas. So the things that they deal with is acid mine drainage from the old coal mines, and then emergency response actions like sinkholes, land collapses, and then filling voids underneath homes when they're discovered. So the next one is Bureau of Water. First one is the wastewater treatment and discharges for the Clean Water Act. This deals mostly with water discharges into streams to make sure that those discharges meet the standards. Second one is the drinking water program. The Safe Drinking Water Act is the federal part of it. and where we provide oversight of all the drinking water systems in the state. The surface water quality standards is set by this program so that a stream has a standard that has to be met. And then a state revolving loan program, which is a low-interest loan program for municipalities to implement to upgrade their wastewater and drinking water systems. Next one is Bureau of Waste Management. That is your solid waste and hazardous waste bureau. They permit and do inspections at landfills, whether they're construction, demolition, industrial, municipal, all the solid waste collection areas in the state. They also are the hazardous waste folks. So if you're a generator in the state of hazardous waste, there's specific rules that apply to them as far as the storage, transportation, and disposal of those hazardous waste. Also in the program is the composting program, the recycling programs, the household hazardous waste, the waste tire program, and they also have a program that deals with illegal dumps and the old city dumps that need to be maintained. Next one is the laboratory. As you heard, we are building a new laboratory on the northeast corner of 12th and Topeka. Groundbreaking is supposed to happen this month, and we feel fairly good that that's going to happen, with a completion date of December of '24. The things that the laboratory does is it provides all of the testing for, or I should say most of the testing for all the drinking water systems in the state. They send their samples in, we analyze them, we report them to the water office for them, and then give them their results. And they also do all the environmental testing for the environmental programs and the stream monitoring program. Next is the health testing portion, which some of the programs that are performed in the health side of the laboratory are things like the newborn screening program. They test for influenza, COVID, tuberculosis, and then if we have an emergency like a white powder incident or some unknown that shows up in the mail, those things are taken to the lab and analyzed to see what they are. Finally, the breath alcohol program is a program where we work with law enforcement for DUIs. We certify the operator and the instrument in which the breath alcohol testing is performed to ensure that it meets all the legal requirements. And then the last one is the lab certification programs for both health and environmental labs, where we go out and look at the private labs to make sure they're following the procedures to ensure that the results that you receive are compliant with the methods in which they were supposed to be done with. So that's a quick overview of Division Environment. So I'll start with the funding part of it. Here's a pie chart, I hope. Yep, okay, there is a pie chart there showing the source of our 23 funding. On the top left, is trust funds, is about $30 million. And that's mostly our underground storage tank petroleum trust fund. But there is a small amount that comes in for the dry cleaning trust fund. As you note, there is $62 million of federal dollars there, which is a fairly large portion of our budget in '23. SGF, as you can see, is $36 million, 800,000. Our SGF normally runs $4 million a year. That's our normal normal SGF amount. But this year, because there is the $32,500,000 of SGF for the laboratory, that is why that number is really ballooned up to where it is now. So it looks like a big number, but it's most of that ballooning is because of the laboratory. State water plans, pretty consistent there, almost $5 million. And then our fee funds are things like our air quality fee, our tipping fee for solid waste, and then all the application and permitting fees that we collect. And that's pretty standard for a normal year. So the next slide is our expenses for '23. Most of it is in contractual services, which is mostly for our cleanup programs, doing cleanup work around the state. Commodities, that's a little higher than normal, mostly because of test kits that we are buying at the lab still. And then just normal office supplies and other consumables. Capital outlay, which is like vehicles and instruments for the laboratory. But then you'll see the capital improvement of 32.5 there, which is, again, the laboratory's amount that we expect to spend in FY23. Aid to local is pass-through funds, sometimes federal, and mostly as grants, and it also goes out for RAPS projects to locals. And then salaries is 24,000 or 24%, which is pretty normal salary for us. So in 24, here we are. You can see that the federal pie increases significantly again. Now we are up to $92 million of federal funds. Again, that is the additional funds of ARPA dollars that we received to build the laboratory with. 50% of the laboratory is paid by SGF, 50% is being paid for by the ARPA dollars. And so the federal pie there explodes again because of the federal ARPA dollars that are being put into our budget to build the laboratory. And then the other around the pie chart around are pretty similar to the 23. There's a little less in trust funds, but the SGF, state water plan, and fee funds are pretty flat. And 24, contractual services, again, our expenditures for 24 are, everything is pretty flat there. Again, capital improvements, that 30.875 there is the ARPA money that will be spent in 24 to build the lab. So that's a big chunk there. And then everything else, salaries, commodities, capital outlay, and aid to locals is pretty flat for year in, year out. So the next slide is just to talk about our normal SGF so that we can understand that our normal SGF has been flat for about the last 8 years, and it does hover around that $4 million mark. In 23 and 24, the two green bars at the right side are the governor's recs. So just to cover the ARPA money again, $32,500,000 of ARPA money was put in for the new laboratory. And just recently, in January of 23, KDHE did receive $10 million of ARPA dollars for this year for the small town water and sewer infrastructure assistance. So we asked for SGF. We received $10 million out of ARPA instead. And we just received it. We just put in our MOU with the Spark Committee folks, and we should be getting that out on the street for the small communities to apply for, hopefully within the next month or two. I do believe that $10 million will be gone very quickly. The need for that is high. So to talk about the bipartisan infrastructure dollars that we've received, it's a 5-year program in which we should receive about $444 million from EPA. The important part of this that you should pick up on is that these are loans. These are not grants. There is some forgiveness in these, but these are loans that are to be repaid back. So last year, we did receive our first installment from EPA. It was about $80 million. And you can see how the money is allocated from EPA to the state to be used. The SRF there is the normal state loan program. There is a lead pipe replacement initiative from EPA to get the lead out of the pipes. And so that money is being used by municipalities to look at what lines that they have, what their compositions are. And the municipalities have 3 years to complete that assessment to see if there is any lead pipe that they need to replace. And so that money is being sent out to the municipalities for that assessment and then ultimately to help them start replacing lead lines. The emerging contaminants are new contaminants that we are starting to see in our water systems. The 8.7 million there for drinking water, most of that went out this year for cities that have been dealing with manganese problems in their drinking water. Most of that money is gone. On the wastewater side, again, the SRF are loans to help them, cities upgrade their wastewater treatment plants. And then again, emerging contaminants are things like PFAS that we're starting to see in our sewer systems. So I'll talk about the enhancements. In 23, we did not have any. In 24, we did ask for $250,000 for the local environmental protection program. And our vision on that is this used to be a program that existed years ago and over time was cut with budget shortfalls. So we did come back and ask for $250,000 from the Kansas Water Authority to restart that program. KDHE receives a lot of interest from county sanitarians that have issues that they're trying to deal with in their county for failing septic tanks and water wells, private water wells, as they deal with low-income residents. And so this program is to try to help those sanitarians resolve some of those issues within the county. Originally, before it was reduced, it was about a $1.2 to $1.5 million a year program. We are trying to bring this back to try to help the county sanitarians deal with their issues within their county. The trash removal is another state water plan request that was vetted through the Water Authority. And this is a pilot project. That's just plain and simple. It's a pilot project. We're going to see how this works. But we do receive a lot of interest from municipalities and nonprofits to deal with trash in their streams. Old trash, new trash, illegal dumps, things like this. And there's many volunteers that do go out and clean up streams on their own nickels and dimes and voluntarily do this work. Sometimes they do run into issues where they need a little help. And the idea is here, if there is a nonprofit group out there that has a project and they need some financial assistance to complete that project, we can make this money available to them so they can clean up the streams. So that's the idea behind it. And then we did, again, ask for additional funding of state general fund to replace aging equipment at the laboratory. This has been funded by this group historically for the last 2 to 3 years, I believe. And this is all for the environmental testing equipment. The health equipment is fairly well up to date with the influx of federal dollars, but the environment side is not privy to that, so we still need help on the environmental side. Accomplishments, just quickly to go over them. We had 4 major air permits issued this year. One for the Goodyear plant here in Topeka. Another one was a soybean processing factory down near Cherryville. Just recently, an asphalt shingle manufacturing company in Newton. And last but not least is the Panasonic site in DeSoto. That is drafted and will be going out for public comments this month easily. Those are major lifts for the AIR program, and They did a very good job. One of the things that has been an issue is a fee increase for the air group, and we've been working on that for about 3 to 4 years. We finally came to a resolution on it, and we passed a new regulation with a new fee structure this last year. Needless to say, our district offices have been busy up at the Keystone Pipeline break. That's an EPA lead response there, but we do have staff there that provide state input into the cleanup actions. Additional accomplishments, our RAPS program was able to reduce almost 140,000 pounds of nitrogen from streams by implementing best management practices on agricultural fields. And our wastewater treatment folks were able to reduce nitrogen and phosphorus concentrations in 70 out of the 120 municipal plants around the state. So, challenges. And I'm just going to touch on these lightly. Employee recruitment retention is still difficult. We are seeing that we are able to recruit people, but then we tend to lose them after about 5 years. We bring them in, we train them, they get some knowledge, and then they go away. Small drinking water system compliance, and this is what the $10 million of Spark money is for. The small communities have a hard time staying in compliance with drinking water requirements and wastewater requirements, but mostly on the drinking water side. And and these are cities that would not qualify for a BIL loan. As I spoke earlier, we have this BIL money that we can give out as loans. But these communities are so small they could never pay the loan back no matter how much forgiveness we gave them. So they're struggling. And so that was the reason for the that we are seeing for the $10 million that we got of ARPA money. Climate change initiatives. We are seeing a lot of lowering of standards from EPA on new initiatives around greenhouse gases, methane, and particulate matter. And we know that we're going to see something come out before December regarding CO2. We just know that there's going to be a lot of changes along this line, all for climate change initiatives from EPA. The perfluorinated and polyfluorinated chemicals, the PFAS, those are those forever chemicals that you might be hearing about in the news. EPA is going to start establishing standards, drinking water standards for those, which will be a game changer for some of our drinking water systems. What PFAS chemicals are those chemicals that you've been hearing about. They're forever chemicals is what they're called. They're bioaccumulators in our systems. And the common things in which we find them is the firefighting foam, AFFF. That's where many of our contaminated sites in the state are at DOD facilities where they did fire training. And then other chemically or consumable things like Teflon on your frying pan, Scotch Guard that you put on your carpeting, and then even things like dental floss is full of PFCs, and the wrappers on your hamburgers that keep the grease in, that's got PFCs on it. So they're chemicals, they're still legal, they are still commercially used, and yet now we have found that they have health effects, and they are slowly moving them out of commerce. But we will have to deal with the after fact of these chemicals in our environment now. Nitrates in groundwater for those communities that use groundwater for drinking water. We estimated that there's about 200 communities in the state that are seeing the nitrate concentrations slowly going up in their wells. So trying to reduce the amount of nitrates going into the groundwater through BMPs is even more and more important right now. Drinking water, wastewater operator workforce. It is hard for small communities and even large communities to get operators to work because you have to be certified to run a drinking water system and to run a wastewater treatment plant, and it's hard to recruit people into those jobs for the municipalities. So that's an ongoing issue. And then just briefly, the environmental justice laws that are coming out or initiatives from EPA. It's an executive order that is implementing new requirements on us, or on the federal government that they try to flow to us. And we are kind of holding still on those because we're waiting for guidance to come out, because there's not a lot of guidance on this initiative. But if you look in the crystal ball, I can see some issues going forward with that. So those are the challenges quickly. And that is the end of my presentation, and I'm more than happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you. And do we have any questions? Senator Fagg.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. On the Bureau of Environmental Field Services, do those inspections get done in a timely manner? It seems like that we've had some shortages, and I've heard people complaining. Has that been an issue or not? That's my first question.
Yes, we've had quite a bit of turnover in our inspectors in the district offices. Again, we tend to be able to get them hired, but once they gain some knowledge about their specific inspection area, private industry can usually lure them away. So yes, we are having problems with keeping our inspectors and being timely. We are meeting our requirements with EPA because we have to report those to EPA, and I will say EPA has been very good to work with as far as they understand the issues. So we're not out of compliance, they're not threatening us, but yes, we are struggling to get some of our inspections done. And it depends on what we're inspecting. If it's a RCRA facility, which is a very complicated inspection, which take longer, those are the ones we tend to be behind on. Things like inspecting a gas station for the underground storage tanks, we're up to speed on that. So it really depends on what media and what program.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. Being an old banker, I know underground storage tanks was kind of a big deal at one time. Is that still a real challenge? Because I know 30 years ago that was a big challenge. I just wonder what the status of that was.
The Underground Storage Tank Trust Fund, I wouldn't say it's a challenge. It's a pretty well-established program, and we are making progress on that. We're closing more sites than what are coming into it. And if you want, I can give you a graph on that, because that's something that we track. But the amount of sites in the program is going down over time.
Senator Straw.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. And thank you, Leo. So the new laboratory, what's the total cost, and what percentage of that is supposedly being dedicated to COVID testing, and what other diseases or whatnot could we test for in space that might be earmarked for COVID testing specifically? And also, is that laboratory going to be fully staffed, or are we building a great big fancy building and not going to be able to staff it?
Well, the building cost is $65 million, which is where we get the 32.5 from SGF and the 32.5 from ARPA. So that's the estimated cost that we went into the building with. We are bidding those projects right now, and we'll have a much better handle on the actual cost probably within 6 months. As you know, things have changed from pre-COVID to now as far as material, labor, things like that. So we'll just have to see on those things. And probably Frank from Burnham Administration would probably be the best person to talk about those things. We are staffed at the lab. We do keep a full staff for environmental and and environmental testing and health testing. And COVID is falling into just the normal routine now of tests that we run. It used to be a dominant test, but now it is just another test of, it's no more than, say, influenza or rubella or things like that. So it's just another test now. It's not a major effort.
Senator Ware?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. On page, where was this? Oh, I don't see. Well, we're State General Fund history. What were we doing in '08 through about 13 that we're not doing now?
Well, you mean because of the reduction of state general funds?
Exactly, yes.
Okay. Well, probably the thing that helped us the most is that there was kind of a direction that we were given by the legislator to move off of state general funds and more toward fee funds. And so over time, we have slowly converted state general fund needs to fee funds.
Have we cut back on any services or oversight?
No, ma'am.
Okay, the mission's the same. Okay, thank you.
Senator Francisco?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. So we talked a bit about the small drinking water system compliance. So my understanding is that KDHE would have the responsibility to make sure that these small municipal water systems are in compliance. If they're not in compliance, how long do you have to work with those entities? Would it be your responsibility to close down those systems?
Good questions. So I'll give you a scenario that did occur, and that might explain. Basically, yes, they have to be in compliance with the Safe Drinking Water Act. Ultimately, that is what has to happen. So the thing that the state usually tries to do is give towns, small communities, time. If we can work out an agreement that you will do X over time, and we're moving in that direction, that's the one thing we can give them is time. We have had instances where EPA has told us we are out of time, and you have to come into compliance. And the city is Pretty Prairie. I don't know if you're all familiar with Pretty Prairie, but they had a nitrate problem, and we were trying to work with the city, and EPA said that was long enough, and they came in and they made Pretty Prairie put in a reverse osmosis system to be in compliance. And it cost the city a little over $2 million to put that in. And then they also had to also take on the operation maintenance of a very complicated system, which is another $100,000 to $200,000 a year of operation maintenance for that reverse osmosis system. So ultimately, yes, the city has to be in compliance with the Safe Drinking Water Act. And what happens is it's going to push KDHE to take enforcement actions against these smaller communities, which is something we don't want to do, but we will be required to do it. And that is why we thought that the financial aid for these small communities was a good idea. Representative Highland last year actually challenged me to do this, so because he understood the problem with the small communities. And so that's why it's in there. And I will say, one of the things we are trying to promote with these small communities that can't afford a drinking water system is to see if there's a regionalization solution where they could hook up to a rural water system. Because some of these communities, we're talking 20, 30 homes. And for them to take on a $2 million bill is just very difficult for them.
Quick follow-up, thank you.
Quick follow-up would be, you said that this MOU is going to be out quickly for that $10 million. you give us an idea of what time you could expect to get those requests in? Would it be before, I'm wondering if the legislature could talk about doing this and then review what the response was to those funds being available?
All right, well, we will target the initial $10 million to those communities that are having compliance problems, the ones that we know need the help and don't have a solution. So the $10 million isn't going to go out for a statewide recruitment, but we know the communities that need the help, and so we will go to them first. And so then we'll see what we receive back. I got to believe that there's enough communities that that $10 million will be gone very quickly.
Oh, thank you. The time is up. All right. We'll see you guys tomorrow, I guess.